Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It is March Madness, and we don't ever slum around here for March Madness guests, which is why I get this guy on, because he's attending the Big South women's events. He's got the Maryland women's. He knows the Maryland men's side. He knows the Towson women's side of the tournament, both brackets. And is it wings or pizza that fires you up at this point, Mike Ashley? How you been, man? I know it's been you've been a traveling man making a lot of stops here during tournament time, right?
I feed the wings, number one. They've got the quad one wing for me. Yes, please.
Perfect. Well, look, the brackets are out now. We're all filling them out. You had a little downtime on Monday to get your bearings. We've now got play-in games, and when you're a Maryland fan, you'll be anxiously there's one market they'll do well in, right? The Maryland market, Belmont Temple, right? I mean, other than Philadelphia and Belmont, wherever the hell that is for us. And Belmont's a threat, right? And Maryland got a good draw in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, the expectations now are a little amped up that your press credential courtside in D.C. next week might be, Special K on one side and Izzo in another locker room. And who knows, if Maryland can survive this week, maybe we really have something special here we'd be talking about next week, right?
Yeah. I think it's a particularly tough bracket when you think about teams like Michigan State in there, Duke, Louisville. It's Virginia Tech too is with their point guard coming back from Justin Robinson from his injury.
You don't have to beat them all. You just have to beat Belmont or Temple, right? I mean,
well, that's true. And you know what? That's Belmont is one of those teams that just seems to be around here every year. They're 26-5 this year. They lost in their championship game in the OVC, but their all conference center didn't play with a bad ankle. They got a 6'8" guy named Dylan Windler who's a stud. They think he's going to play at the next level. And if you look back at Belmont's history, in 2014 they were 2 points down to UVA late in the game before the Cavaliers pulled away, and then in 2008 they had a 1-point loss to Duke. So there's some history there. And Rick Byrd, who's been there doing it for 33 years as their coach, says this is his best team, and they're an at-large team. So. They
go out to UCLA, right? I mean, so it's not. There's nothing really big about any of this. And for Maryland playing in a sleepy gym on Thursday against a team that already played, we say, well, that's fatigue. I don't know about that at this time of the year. I mean, fatigue to me looks the way the Terps have played lately. Uninspired against Nebraska, uninspired against Penn State. And I think as a Maryland fan, it's hard to envision them playing next weekend like that. But we've also seen them play well. I mean, they are truly a dangerous, mystery, weird team that my pool might be a puddle on Thursday afternoon by dinner time, right? Like literally.
Well, yeah. But it's hard. They don't have any more mulligans. So you hope this team understands that this is it. You can't put out an effort like you did against Nebraska in the Big Ten there. And your season's done if you do. I like the same things I've liked all season. Nobody's got an inside combination when they're both on like Sticks, Smith, and Bruno Fernando. Who at the OVC level or Temple can match up with something like that. Plus, you got Cowan, who's a veteran point guard. So you think he's probably going to be a good guy. They got to cut down the turnovers, though. Of course, the NCAA games by nature get a little bit slower, a little bit more half court. So maybe that works to help Maryland in terms of they don't go crazy out there. I love Ayala too. That guy's never played like a freshman this year. So I like the Maryland backcourt. I see them getting out of that first game, and then. You're probably going to face LSU in the second round. And
hey, Mike, a lot of people have been here this week on Yale, right? I mean, and I guess it's because Yale has been impressive in scoring, but more than that, it's LSU's problems, right? I mean,
exactly.
This would be where you would say they have a lot of challenges there on and off the court, and will that become a distraction for these kids and for what they represent? I don't think you can ever know. I mean, there's something to not like about every team team in the tournament, including Gonzaga at this point, other than Duke, right? Like, we're all trying to beat Duke, but every team has a bad loss or a bad series of losses or bad beats or whatever it would be, or bad luck in Michigan State not getting seeded properly and boo-hoo and all that stuff. But, I've been calling it the NACC all week with the Duke, Virginia, North Carolina top seeds, and I know you respect all that, but, they like to make these fights, don't they? And they've created, it's almost like Vince McMahon creating a battle royal to some degree. They really try to set these things up, and there is a notion that DC could be crazy next week with the way they put this thing together and the way the Maryland-Duke thing might set up, right?
Right. And my point about LSU is I think they're going to out-talent Yale in the first round and get to the second round. And then Maryland is a team that they can't do that too. So I think, and the troubles they have may surface. And I think, Maryland could be a Sweet 16 team like many people thought from the get-go this year when things were rolling at mid-season. And then the part that always worries a Maryland fan is you probably have to get through Michigan State. So that's always been problematic. And then if you do that, you get Duke, for Pete's sake. So yeah, let me say something about Duke. Zion Williamson, I've been critical of how much hype he's got all year, but man, he lived up to it in the ACC tournament. But this Duke team, like many Duke teams over the years that have, failed to get all the way. This is a jump shooting team, and they're not very good. If Zion gets in foul trouble or something, and they're relying on knocking down jump shots, I could see this Duke team having some trouble because they're not always there, and you don't know how these kids are going to react in this kind of spotlight. Obviously, they turned it up in the ACC, but I think there's a little bit of hope for those of us that are kind of tired of the Blue Devil hype machine that something could happen to them along the way.
Well, yeah, I think we're all focused on this East bracket now that Maryland's drawn into it, right? So, to me, for where Maryland's been and the struggles they've had and didn't look like they wanted to even be in Chicago other than for the popcorn and the deep dish pizza last week, that there have been days they haven't shown up, and to find themselves on a line against teams that have to play and against the drama of whatever LSU is, with the chance of, hey, we don't like Michigan State, and you want to matter in the Big Ten? Knock them out of the tournament. Let's go. Oh, and by the way, if you get to do that, you do it on your home floor, essentially, and then you get Duke across the street, which everybody around here's always wanted. I mean, it would not be hard to rally that battle cry in a different way than if they were bracketed somewhere else, where they're seeing a bunch of teams where you don't have any bloodthirst as a fan. So I think if you are a Maryland fan, and everyone who's ever been a Maryland fan has a bracket, you look up in the bracket and see Duke and Michigan State and you see DC, you start to envision the things you've talked about, which is they've been really good at various points this year. They've got NBA players on their floor. They have incredible freshmen on their floor. They have an upperclassman handling the ball where this shouldn't be too big for him, and on certain nights it hasn't been too big for him. For Bruno Fernando, who's going to go make a lot of money in a couple of weeks when he enters the draft, this is a chance to play another weekend, have an exclamation point on this. And more than that, even if you lose to Michigan State, you're supposed to lose to them anyway. You made it to the 16, and all of this buzz I hear about Turgeon, I mean, the other side of this, Mike, is that they lose to Belmont on Thursday and spoil my dinner on Thursday afternoon, and the wings get all cold and the beer's all warm and they're out of the tournament. There's also we can make a case for that. I saw the Nebraska game last week. Probably can make an easier case for that than the fact that they're going to be playing Duke next weekend. But I can dream a little bit, and I think that's what we do with these brackets, is to say, where is the pathway out of this? And they're good enough to win 2 games this weekend, which I think brings the spotlight back onto the guy making all of the money, as opposed to guys making none of the money. And Turgeon's under fire right now, and this is a really important weekend for him.
Well, yeah, and for all the reasons you said, I think there's heightened awareness with the bracket, the way it worked out for Maryland fans. The big thing to me, though, is Nebraska sort of threw out a template there of getting the ball out of Bruno's hands quickly, not allowing him to beat you with the pass or with his athletic skills getting to the basket. And Maryland's going to have to make some adjustments to not let that happen anymore. Now, unfortunately, I think if Belmont gets there, they've got some big people that can do similar things. So some of the other guys have got to step up. I think early in the game, it would mean a lot if Cowan or some of the other guys knock down a couple of threes and kind of loosen things up. We'll see how that plays out. And I do think Maryland's defense can cause a little bit of trouble if they want to extend at least into half court and try and create some things with some traps and things like that. Because I do think Maryland is deeper than a couple of the teams they'll face early on.
Well, they'd have to be better on a given day against Michigan State, where you and I have watched that show before, and it feels like they might play him 10 times and maybe win once or twice. That's kind of the way it felt. But it doesn't feel like they're out of their league either on any given day when our guys get off the bus and your guys get off the bus, especially in a tournament like this where, UMBC beat Virginia last year, right? So, let's not lose sight of the fact that somebody's going to wear the Cinderella slipper here this weekend, and it's probably going to be somebody that plays their best, that already probably had a lot of talent, right? And in this case, no one would be shocked that we're talking about Maryland next week from a talent perspective. We'd be shocked based on the fact that it hasn't been very consistent lately.
Right. Yeah, it's. I don't know. I really feel for Maryland because I can feel the pressure already building, and that's not been a good scenario for them. And Michigan State is the new Duke in their world, and they may. It usually seems like a men versus boys thing because Michigan State's just so tough around the basket. They play so hard. They defend so well. And I cannot think of Michigan State without thinking of that Gary Williams NCAA game against them where the guy ducks and the ball goes through to another guy and hits a shot to beat him. I think Gary Williams probably sees that in his sleep now still because that really cut him.
Do you really think Gary replays the losses more than the wins? Really? Yeah. Oh, right. You've met Gary. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that team that was one that really. When Gary still talks about that.
I'm sure he does.
He thought that team had a chance to go deep, and just.
Do you ever get together with Gary when he talks about how great they played against Indiana or how they beat Kansas? Does he ever talk about those, or I don't know? I love those stories. Bring me those stories. Tell me about Byron Mouton laying out on the floor. That's what I want to hear about.
Like most coaches, though, he's always focused on the tough losses. And the rest of us remember those great wins and all the things he did, and of course the way he just wore his Maryland pride right on his sleeve for all that he was the guy that stood up to the ACC complaining about the way all the advantages went to the Tobacco Road schools and things like that. I remember it used to call Maryland the northern outpost of the league.
Carolina refs. I have said that many times at Cole Fieldhouse. Mike Ashley joining us here from Terrapin Times. You can find his act out at Terrapin Times as well. Tell me where you're doing your comedy and Roth Report and all the other good stuff so people can laugh along with their brackets with you this week.
Yeah, on Twitter at large sports writer, the baseball box score with no vowels in it there. So you can find me just Mike Ashley on Twitter there. And actually, I've been writing for my old hometown newspaper, the Roanoke Times, that I used to string high school football for. I ended up covering the women's basketball tournament after Maryland was out of the Big Ten. I was able to go down there, and that used to be my job, covering women's basketball there as an SID. And then last night I about fell out of my chair when Radford landed at Maryland, so it looks like I'll be covering that this weekend too.
Well, Maryland in on the ladies' side as well, Towson ladies in, and this is a week where if you don't follow women's basketball, it sort of comes to you a little bit, right? Like on the off days, the down days, the tournament, it's on my timeline. Certainly Maryland being involved. We got great respect for everything Brenda's done, and obviously I've worked with her on leukemia and other things with my wife and her son battling. This is a fun time if you love basketball, and I think this is the weekend, right? We all sort of get the wings and get the beer and get the brackets out and all that. But from a local perspective, for what UMBC has pulled off in previous years, what Coppin has pulled off, Towson's qualified at various points, Maryland's our only hope. and I think part of that is, you're more regional in that, hey, Virginia Tech might be showing up in D.C. next week with all the Hokie Nation, right? Virginia's involved in this. The ACC's involved in this. Lots of other local causes, local people. We got some Baltimore kids in the brackets involved in the tournament as well. But it happens real quickly, and as I said with Maryland and Turgeon and the amount of heat on him, I just hope for our sake, because I know how this goes, the tournament lasts a whole other week here if they can make it through the weekend, and there would be such anticipation for that. And I feel like Maryland basketball needs that right now, based on the empty seats I've seen, based on the fire under Turgeon, based on the kid who died on the field last year for the basketball side. It would be a very nice thing through all of this Big Ten transition and all the things they've done to have something memorable happen for Maryland basketball. This is the only time that can happen. That doesn't happen if you beat Michigan State by 20 last month, or that if you wake up early and beat Nebraska by a bucket and make it to the second game of the tournament. It can only happen now. And I think that's where we are with college basketball. It's a little different, I think. Maybe the Capitals, before they won, right, the Stanley Cup, it was a little bit like, wake me up in April. Well, wake me up in March, and here we are. I think the spotlight's on them in a big way, and I think this is a real opportunity for the brand, for the Terps, for College Park, for Turgeon, for my buddy Bino, who, I coached when he was a 10, 11-year-old kid on Saturday mornings, whom I love. And, I want to see them get through this, and I really like these kids. But, man, when they're losing by 15 in Nebraska and you're sitting there watching this, and it's very, very hard to clear my calendar for next weekend, Mike. You know what I mean?
I do, and Maryland's history in that building hasn't been particularly great, at least not since the national championship year. The Big Ten tournament came here for Maryland, and the Terps were out quickly. Yeah, but you know what? All this stuff we're talking about, Nestor, that doesn't apply to these kids. I don't think they think that way. They've got enough on their plate, and I do think I get a chance to go out and talk to the guys again this week before the tournament starts, so I'll have a better read then. But I think these guys are probably going to play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, which has always been good. Gary Williams, Lefty Drizel, those teams always are a little mad about the way things have shaken out. And, I think Maryland's going to have that going for them going into this. And I expect to see them show up in D.C. for the Sweet 16.
You're circling them twice on your brackets. You got them going through? Yeah, good. I'm circling them too because I want them to win. I do.
I've got them getting to Michigan State.
Okay,
that's
good
all
enough.
I'm going to say.
Well, you know what? And if they get to Michigan State, for me, then they gave the fans something, right? If you give me 40 minutes on the floor with Michigan State next week and essentially a home game, right? I mean, to some degree, and I know there'll be plenty of Dukies there and all that stuff. Tickets are already, strips are already $400 on the anticipation. Everybody wants to go and all that. I'm going to be in Phoenix this week for the NFL owners meetings. And, I get off the plane. I mean, it's a crazy sports week, Mike. I think I said this to you when I was green rooming you. It's amazing because the Terps have a chance to get through this weekend. Like, I look at the brackets and I'm thinking, What kind of a draw did you want? You have a team ahead of you in absolute turmoil playing in a 14 seed that they might lose to, right? And you're getting to play a play-in game seed, you know what I mean, with a chance to come home. I think it sets up beautifully for them, and I would have told you a week ago I wouldn't have thought that, but I think I'm going to be working pretty hard in Phoenix. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'm out there watching spring training and doing the owners' meetings and seeing who Bob Kraft is going, what spa he's attending at the Biltmore next week. But I get back. It's opening day for real, right? For real, it's opening day in New York for the Orioles in a season they're going to lose triple digits. But then, there could be basketball here that weekend that would really set it apart. I mean, they have a chance to do something really cool, and I don't think you get many opportunities to do that. And certainly for Turgeon, he's been here almost a decade. This would be something cool if they could get into a position to play Michigan State next week. And if they lose by 20, I honestly would be okay with that because I don't think they're as good as Michigan State, but I think that to fulfill that destiny, they need to get through the weekend. And I just think it's really, really important for the program that things go well here this week, maybe more so than it's been.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about Maryland playing that game in a building where they'll definitely have a home court advantage. Plus, I would bet that the Duke fans would be rooting for Maryland in that too.
Hey, how old is that kid that was crying back during the tournament? Remember was that 02, 03? Dude, that kid's got to be 29 years old now, right? I mean, the kid,
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll break him, but we'll get him to the game as well. Mike Ashley, Terrapin Times here. He's doing comedy somewhere out on the web, and Roth Report, and serious bracketology. Some other thoughts about the brackets, because, I mean, you cover as much ACC basketball as anyone. Thoughts about Virginia, North Carolina, and even Gonzaga, which I know we talked about before, but, they sort of spit all over themselves last week as well, and still find themselves in a number one seed position. It's an open tournament everywhere, but unless you see Duke, I guess, right?
Well, right. Now, my process in doing this, I did my first bracket yesterday. Now, my first bracket, there will be many drafts before I submit one, press the send button and put it in somebody's pool here. But I got Gonzaga going all the way. And I feel much more comfortable talking about Michigan State and Maryland teams and Virginia Tech, teams that I've actually seen play live. Now, the out west teams, I have not, I got to admit, I haven't seen them live. I've seen the ACC people enough, Virginia and Carolina, to feel pretty comfortable about that. I got a bad vibe about Carolina. I got them losing to Auburn in the Sweet 16. I got Virginia getting all the way to the regional championship against a really good Tennessee team, and somehow I just think Tony Bennett and his squad is due. I got them going all the way in and beating Kentucky to get to the national championship, where Gonzaga will have beaten Michigan State, who I think is going to take out Maryland and Duke. And so I got the Zags in a low-scoring game prevailing over Virginia.
Well,
That's my national champion.
A series of ones and twos, and it's interesting that we would talk about the Terps and the disappointment, right, of what it would be to lose to a Belmont or a Temple or a Yale or whatever would happen if they're not playing basketball after the Orioles and the Nationals open the season next weekend. If they're not playing a game next weekend, I think it would be disappointing. But then you look at where Virginia is, right? And what's at stake for them after what happened to them last year. You talk about disappointments and teams that haven't climbed that mountain and haven't won. I don't know if it's easier for Villanova because they've won, or harder for Gonzaga because they haven't, or different for Duke because, K's got a whole a closet full of them, but not these kids, you know what I mean? And I hear this Zion kid being thrown around with, the Bill Waltons and the Luau Cinders and the greatest play, and that's all well and good for 5 minutes, and we'll see whether he can win 6 games in a row, right? If he's that good, right? It's like Bruno Fernando. Dude, if you're that good, you don't lose to Belmont. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel about it, right?
That's simple, yeah.
That's how I look at it. This is the time that if you want to, run your mouth, you want to be LeBron, you want to be Jordan, you want to get paid, you want to show off, you want to get drafted, you think you're a baller, this is the time to wake up in an empty gym, for the most part, what we've got here, against whatever 14 seed they put in front of you, and not get your ass kicked like Virginia did last year, right? Literally. And they got their ass kicked. I mean, it's one thing to chaminade and lose at the, somebody hits a three-pointer at the buzzer. I mean, we've seen wacky stuff happen in this tournament, and Virginia stands at the center of all the indignity from chaminade to UMBC, right? And by the way, Ralph Sampson linked me in recently. Hit me. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, and Ralph Sampson wants to know whether I accept his, and I'm like, hell yeah, I accept Ralph Sampson. So there's my Ralph Sampson reference for you. So that's still me kicking Terry Holland and Lee Raker and Jeff Lamp around. So have at that.
Well, I got to warn you, Ralph's on a big fundraising kick. They've kicked off a charity in honor of his father, and I know a little bit about that because
Ralph's a good man.
Sampson, his sister's SID. So yeah, and I couldn't get them to do the big promotion for her on her last night to give away free luggage and call it Samson night. But,
do you know like how idolization worked in 1977, 78, 79, 80 when you're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old and you see Ralph Sampson, posting up and beating up on Maryland and coming into the whole deal. And never winning, by the way. And then, he shows up in my studio like 20 years later, all 7-4. And so Ralph Sampson, Virginia, all that. But you talk about not winning, right? I mean, we got a trophy this century, right? And for the programs that do, there's still the longing as a Terps fan, and I'm wearing my red shirt to support my red LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute shirt. I want them to do well. I want them to be relevant again. And I've liked this move to the Big Ten and stuff. I've been into it. But as I look at the bracket and I call it the NACC, all these years later, it's we're still living in a Ralph Sampson, Dean Dome world here. And Kay's still there from 1982 for crying out loud, right?
Well, as a native Virginian, I always appreciated Ralph staying home, and especially not going to Kentucky. If you think about what Kentucky was even back then, what he would have meant.
Should have talked to Alonzo Mourning about that, right?
Been a thorn in the ACC side for a while. Instead, he went to UVA, and it was really great. And those teams, the talent around Ralph at that time was so overrated. They did not have good players, but not great, other than maybe Jeff Lamp. They really did not ever get pieces around him. And so you can say, yeah, Ralph didn't do this, didn't do that. But I mean,
love Ralph.
The level he raised that program to forever changed things in Charlottesville. And if the crazy thing was, if you remember, the year after he was gone, they had that Cinderella team that got to the Final Four with Kenton Edlin, a former walk-on, and guys like that, one of the Stokes. I get my Stokes brothers confused now from back in the day, but that was a lot of fun. And here's the fun fact I like. I saw posted was that since 2018, number 1 overall seeds, which of course will be Duke this year, are 0-1 in the NCAA tournament. So watch out.
Mike Ashley joining us here from Terrapin Times. You can find him out on Twitter at Roth Report. I hope you have a good bracket. I always say I hope my pool is not a puddle by 5 p.m. on Thursday night, and it usually is because usually I circle teams like Xavier and Gonzaga and Belmont and sometimes Maryland. I hope this isn't the year. Mike, I hope you good fortunes on your pool this weekend. It's always great to have you on Talking Hoops. And, I do hope we have some time circled and that I'm sitting literally next to a cactus somewhere in Arizona Monday or Tuesday with an extreme need to discuss basketball with you because big things will be happening when I get home. Okay?
Yeah, and I'll try not to hate on you too much for being out there in the sun, all right?
Come on, we all get a couple of days in the sun every winter, hopefully, if we work hard enough, right?
All right, pal. Well, have a great trip.
Cheap hotel rooms and expensive spring training tickets. That's the realities. Mike Ashley joining us here from Terrapin Times, getting you ready for March Madness. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We're out in the Bay at Toyota.com Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. So much going on right now with the Ravens, with the league. Got owners meetings this week. Obviously, the sort of the fallout of all the Flacco, Suggs, Weddle, and the fall in of Earl Thomas. We're talking about all that stuff. I'm going to be with a bunch of NFL people in Phoenix this week. I'm going to be spring training, maybe even with Manny Machado in Peoria. That's not Illinois, that's Arizona. You can Google that. We're also delivering the morning newspaper on a daily basis. All brought to you by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com. $5 down, $10 a month. And right around the corner from you, there is always a Planet Fitness nearby. The Maryland Jockey Club welcoming you to Laurel, where, yes, they have built a bigger, nicer track. They want to show it off. They want you to come see it. We're going to be talking about the Preakness and all of that stuff as we head into Triple Crown Times. The entries at WNST.net as well as in our morning newspaper. Last but never least, it has been a very, very busy month for the WNST Tech Service. All brought to you by Coons Ford Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here getting you ready for the weekend, and basketball, and the Terps, and all that stuff from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. And, of course, if you're on our Tech Service, you get it first and fast and furious this time of the year as we have opening day a week away, Terps in the middle of madness, and football and draft ahead. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.